Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kellorn, Venacera, and Arun.
Hello and welcome to episode 96 of the Warships Podcast. I'm back from my move and super happy to be actually able to record the podcast this week. Today, Venacera and Arun are here as we talk about a variety of new ships that we've been testing over the last couple of weeks. So, Vanessa, you've been out and about for a couple of weeks, so we're glad to have you back, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, scheduling conflicts, I know internet outage and other crazy things that just, for one reason or another, have been really hard to do the show past couple of weeks.
Well, like I said, we're glad to have you back, and we're looking forward to talking about these new ships. So the first one is actually one I know that Vanessa actually spent a fair amount of time testing because she told me about it. And it's the Tier 6 German premium battleship Prinz Eitel Friedrich. And I found this to be a really interesting ship for me personally, but I wanted to hear what your thoughts on it were, Vanessa.
Geez, what an amazing Tier 6 battleship that you folks are going to have a really fun time playing. Yeah, the guns can be a little interesting in their accuracy and shot dispersion patterns, but my gosh, the ship is just fun. It handles well. It's got decent speed. The turrets rotate quickly. The secondaries are decent. I know some people were testing secondary builds. I actually never went in and tried testing a full-on true and secondary build. But because it's tier 6, you don't have crazy good secondary range. But the anti-aircraft on this battleship is pretty strong. And there were several games, especially being at tier 6, where you will encounter double CVs. And in that environment, with the AA, if you just put, your basic German captain that you're leveling up, and if you already have AFT and BFT, you absolutely decimate fighter or plane groups if they get near you. There were multiple games where I shot 30 plus aircraft down, and I simply don't. I think the CVs probably didn't realize how well my anti-aircraft was, but there was a couple games where planes just kept, or carriers just kept sending their planes at me, and I'm like, okay, after the first couple of fighter or plane groups that you lost, maybe that might have clicked that, you probably shouldn't keep sending your planes this way, but it was just incredible. The guns hit pretty well. When they do hit, there will be oftentimes that you'll shoot and the accuracy just goes all over the place, but it's fun. It's one of those battleships that even though it's tier 6, like, I didn't really have a problem going up against tier 8s, because I felt like there was targets that I could still engage, still get my damage in, and still contribute to the team. And because of that, I felt very much like, Chisari was, that this is a fun ship, regardless of who you're fighting against.
Would you say that she's like the Gneisenau, just at tier 6?
That's an interesting comparison. I mean, you don't have torpedoes, and you don't have as fast of a speed as Gneisenau, because she is stupid quick. But she's fast enough, and you have something I didn't mention. The turret firing angles of Friedrich is, or not Friedrich, Frederick, or no, Friedrich, or I can't think right now. Friedrich, thank you. The turret angles are brilliant on this ship, and I know some people were actually noticing it when they were fighting against it. I even saw people like commenting in the chat, like, wow, that has really good turret angles. And it does. It allows you to have a pretty good defensive angle, fire off all your guns, and then return to an even better angle. There were multiple times that I was just complete on, almost not necessarily bow tanking, but just deflecting shots left and right. And even though it is a battle cruiser per se, like I felt almost like Amagi in the sense of just trolling people, taking shots, doing very well defensively. And because the ship handles so well, you really feel confident in your ability to take shots, especially from other battleships, and then just return fire, and just get in there. It, as an aggressive player, I had a lot of fun in this ship.
So I actually have a question that after Vanessa talked about that from that angle, Aaron, I had a lot of fun driving this ship. I didn't have a lot of fun fighting this ship. Like when you are shooting your guns, I had a hard time getting getting the shots that I wanted. The secondaries, I did try a secondary build. The secondary build was pretty meh because of the accuracy at tier 6 more than the range. But I mean, driving it around feels really, really awesome. And Vanessa's right. The gun angles are amazing. But when you actually pull the trigger on the guns, I was constantly disappointed.
So it's more like Bayern?
I felt like it was I felt like it was a Bayern that handled well and was fast. I guess, what were your impressions of the ship, Arun?
I don't know, because I didn't get to play it.
You missed this. You
Yeah.
missed this one. I forgot. But yeah, Vanessa, I guess I would have a hard time recommending it as a ship because I had a hard time getting decent damage totals in it. And without getting decent damage totals, your experience that you're farming in a premium and the money that the credits that you're farming in a premium, that they kind of fall off by a certain degree. What offsets that for you? Like, there's no, like, I didn't have a torpedo system that I could get extra damage in or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I guess mileage might vary, but I mean, it felt like almost every game that I played, and I legitimately put a lot of testing games in it, not as many as sorry, but I definitely put some time in the ship, and I felt like every game I at least did a minimum 100k damage. And it might have been a difference in playstyle because I can get pretty aggressive. I will flank, and I will push the advantage when I see it, and I will go in even if I'm going to sink. I'll get in there and absolutely do damage. And there were so many games where, and I didn't, now that I think about it, I actually didn't sink a lot, even though I was really aggressive. So I might have just been, pushing the issue, getting in there, surviving, but still being aggressive enough to still get my damage in. Because there were multiple games. I mean, I've got screenshots, and I even felt like doing a set of videos, or a compilation video of just my experience in this ship and throw it up on YouTube, because I had probably, I want to say 4 or 5 games at least, that I broke 2K base experience easily in this game testing it.
All right, there you go, guys. So in terms of a ship, if you are an aggressive player, Friedrich is for you. If you're more of a cautious battleship player, maybe not so much.
Actually, I have a question still. Do you think that your results are, well, maybe they're based on luck? Because when I played Gneisenau, like I have 30 odd games on her, I average 107k damage, even though most players complain that you can never hit anything with it. And I think it's just because I got super lucky with the ship. Do you think that maybe you got really lucky with the ship you tested?
Well, I mean, that's always a good point. But I mean, I feel that I have the same results in Chissari. And that's another ship that I'm very aggressive in. And I mean, German battleships as a whole, I feel I perform well in. But again, I'm not afraid to get in there and be aggressive. And I mean, there's players who, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, Kaloran, but you are very deliberate and you're very thinking about, where you're going and how you're delivering damage, and you punish players very well. But I look at where the team's going, what I'm going up against, and then if I can charge in, I will do that. and I will kind of force the issue and get closer. And I think maybe because I'm not afraid to get closer, I actually generate more damage because then I'm utilizing the gun systems better because I'm getting closer.
Well, I will say that the guns perform much better the closer you get. It is definitely a brawler type of ship, and I often have a hard time with that kind of gameplay. I'm more of a deliberate. I wait for people to make mistakes and punish them, like you said. So yeah, I think that maybe this is going to be one of those premiums that it's really going to be about what's your play style. If you play, like Vanessa does, and you're really you want to charge in there, and really the German battleship play style for the most part. If that's the way you like to play, this is going to be a good premium for you. And from that perspective, I do think it will be a good premium for training because of that. Now, the other question that I have for both of you is there a play? We had a tier 6 ranked season several seasons ago, and we might see one again in the future. What kind of impact do you see this ship having on a tier 6 ranked season, particularly because of just the way that she handles and the speed that she has compared to the other tier 6 battleships?
Doesn't sound like she would beat the Fuso.
Yeah. I mean, ranked always kind of comes down to being able to nail your shots and deliver damage, but do so when someone makes a mistake. And Fuso, it's still Fuso. And while I really like this ship, a lot of times ranked kind of devolves down to a defensive, get in position and punish someone who makes a mistake when they make a mistake. And oftentimes you have a very small window to do that. And I don't think PEF will be able to do that consistently, where other ships, have much better accuracy or are better suited, or even just have the range to be able to do that. Because you have 17.3 or something kilometers with it. So, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not incredibly great either.
Yeah, I just, it's an interesting choice. I think that it'll be an interesting choice for a lot of people. And I really think that the speed might be a really decisive factor for it to be effective in ranked battles. So we'll just have to see if that does occur. So the next one up on our list is the tier 9 French battleship Jean Bart. Now, Jean Bart is a little bit of an interesting history-wise for me. She was a sister ship of Richelieu, which, and I believe Jean Bart was the ship that dueled Massachusetts. Is that correct, Vanessa?
That is correct.
And I believe Jean Bart only had one turret when she dueled Massachusetts instead of both of her turrets. In game, I found her to be a really interesting ship to play. She's kind of everything that I hoped Richelieu would be at tier 8, but just at tier 9. Now, the other thing that you get introduced with the Jean Bart is the reload booster for the battleship. And it really, I did find it to be an interesting and situational type of thing. I was able to do a lot of damage with it, but you still have to deal with these 380 millimeter guns at tier 9 and only having 8 of them. So that's kind of the balance of the ship, is that you kind of have to pick on people and take shots against ships that you are going to do damage. I took a lot of upper belt armor shots. I was not going for citadels on enemy battleships for the most part. I was doing a lot of penetration damage, which the ship was actually quite good at. And when you can point your bow at them with the 32 millimeter bow, I did find her to be quite tanky as well.
How was fighting cruisers with her, though?
I didn't find it too bad because of the narrow aspect ratio of when you're pointing your bow at them. For the most part, they can't land a full salvo of shots on you, and you only get like one fire at a time at most per salvo. Now, I had a little more trouble with Des Moines just because Des Moines can salvo so many times in a short period. But Des Moines, if they go, they have to really be careful as well. They can't go show your broadside because you can take so many shots in such a short period of time, particularly when you pop that reload booster, that they just can't survive. So it's one of those, you kind of bow on to bow on, and then it's kind of a DPS race.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, can't you just angle like almost all the other tier 10 cruisers? Because 380 millimeter guns means that you can't overmatch them.
That is the thing, is that that's the weakness of Jean Bart, is against smart players. Jean Bart is a very difficult ship to do damage with. In random battles, it's a really easy ship to do damage with.
Yeah,
Wow,
I kind of agree with that.
What did this on random players?
I'm just saying that in random battles, you're much more likely to see people who are doing things in an uncoordinated fashion. You there may be somebody that's playing very, very smart, and they're angling to you, but there's a guy over here who's not paying attention to you and is paying attention to your other part of your team and is giving you a broadside. So in random battles, I feel like you always have those shots available to take, whereas in competitive modes, you often don't. And sorry, we interrupted you twice with Vanessa.
No, I was gonna say, historically, the fight against Massachusetts, Jean Bart did have one turret. You could say there was a work in progress. No,
that was bad.
The Jean Bart, I actually surprised myself because I didn't think I was gonna do as well as I did in the ship. But that also being said, the complete opposite of PEF. Jean Bart, like, you just sit there and can reverse and shoot shots and shots and shots. And you could do HE spam, you could do AP spam. I had a Yamato just bow on, and we just traded shots about 13 kilometers away from each other. And I would switch back to HE, light about 2 or 3 fires, switch back to AP, just aim straight for the superstructure and just keep putting shells into the superstructure. And I did that on attacking Des Moines as well. Just aim for that superstructure and just try and get the AP in there. And I was doing enough damage, and most of the games I was doing very well damage-wise, ending the game with really good results, and showing something for my team. So, I don't want to say I was disappointed. The ship performs, but this one is the complete opposite of my play style compared to a ship like PEF, because I don't like sitting there going bow on and just being like a slow moving fort like the old Bastion mode. That's not what I want to do in the game. I want to cruise around. I want to zip around. I want to move. I want to dodge shots. I want to trade fire. I want to flank. And yeah, you could do that with this ship, but you don't have to, because all your guns are forward. And even when there was carriers, the AA was pretty incredible. There was a Two Brothers match I remember where it was just me and Asashio on one side of the map, and that was it. Everyone else completely lemon trained the other way. So I just kind of hugged an island and kind of defended against multiple battleships and cruisers for quite a while before, the team kind of came back to help defend the base. And we ended up winning pretty big. And yeah, it was a great defensive stand there, and the ship did really well in that role, but it's not something that I enjoyed. So again, mileage may vary on what play styles people like with ships like these.
For the record, I thought the earlier joke was really, really funny. I just muted myself not to interrupt. But I wanted to ask, could you guys explain some of the history, like why the Jean Bart fought the USS Massachusetts, and actually noticed that she got attacked by the Ranger as well?
So I believe what happened, and I could be wrong, but Jean Bart was fitting out in it's not Tunisia, it's Algeria. Algiers. So she was fitting out in the port in Algiers when the Americans were in the Mediterranean and trying to invade North Africa. And Massachusetts and Ranger and their task group was assigned to to get the French fleet to either surrender or destroy it. And so they called upon the French to surrender. The French the Navy wouldn't surrender, and they opened fire. And so Massachusetts dueled Jean Bart, Jean Bart really wasn't in a position to do it. She was tied up to the dock with one turret, so it's not like it was a fair fight or anything. But yeah, that was I believe they sank Jean Bart, and then they captured Richelieu. And Richelieu they took back to New York Harbor, refitted her, and she ended up in the service of the Free French Navy.
Sounds made up considering what the story started with. I'm so sorry.
All good.
She was.
I may have gotten some. I may have had a couple of the details wrong there because I didn't do enough research about that before I started talking about that. So I apologize to the history nerds if I messed some of that up. And you guys can feel free to send me nasty gram messages and tell me what I got wrong. But let's move on to the next set of ships, Harugumo and Kitakaze, which are the tier 9 and tier 10 of the Akizuki line of the IJN destroyers. Now, these ships went in a pretty interesting direction because in the middle of the testing, they had their HE penetration changed from 1/6 to 1/4, which gives them 25 millimeters of HE penetration without internal fuse for HE shells. Now, this kind of changed the game and changed the way that these ships play, particularly Harugumo. And I think we're going to talk to Arun a little bit about just what Harugumo can do, right?
Oh yeah, that ship is insane, like really insane. It's a literal Des Moines in terms of firepower. If you take BFT and the reload upgrade, which I don't see why you wouldn't take them on that ship, she puts out 300,000 HE DPM, which is equivalent to a Des Moines, and because you have IFHE, your HE penetration is the same as the Des Moines, which means that goodbye anything with 32 millimeters of armor, which includes all the cruisers, I think, except I guess the Moskva, but all the other ones, and a lot of the battleships, especially the French ones. She puts out so much HE DPM that I had a game where even a Conqueror ran away from me because of how much damage she took just from the HE spam. And there's very little, you can do in return unless you have radar because she can smoke up. She's still fairly fast, like 38 knots plus speed boost. So she is a really deadly ship. Oh, and of course she also has those 6 torpedoes per launcher, and well, she only gets 1 launcher, but she has torpedo reload boosters, so there's still 12 torpedoes after that, and I found her to be insane. Like, the damage output on that ship is nuts, especially for a DD.
Yeah, and the other thing that you didn't mention is that she duels other destroyers like nobody's business. Like, I had a Yu Yang that I went toe-to-toe with, and I just wrecked him in an astonishingly short period of time.
Oh yeah, she's literally like the Daring, except she can pen cruisers as well.
Vanessa, did you get a chance to play around with Kitakaze and Harugumo? And I guess if you're fans of Akizuki, are you going to like these ships?
Well, I mean, I put in quite a few games of the previous version that we tested. I did not actually test this latest iteration of it, but from what it sounds like, it does sound pretty dangerous. And to answer that question, yes. I think at this point with these changes, and I actually was okay with the previous iteration of Kitakaze that I tested, but from what it sounds like, if you are a fan of Akazuki, excuse me, you are probably going to like this as well. It will definitely make it worth your while to go up the rest of the line, go to tier 10, and enjoy it.
The first iteration, I agree with Vanessa. Like, they were strong ships even in their first iteration, and when you change that up to the 25 millimeters of HE penetration, they do some pretty stupid things. And I enjoyed them quite a bit. I'm not a huge DD player, but they are really gunboat destroyers in a way that you don't normally get to see in the IJN line.
I guess their one downside is that, especially the Harugumo, she is enormous. I bet if you put her up like next to some of the lower tier cruisers, she would be just as big, if not bigger. And that's a major downside because open water gunfighting is very difficult because you'll be punished by battleships, most definitely. But even then...
Oh yeah. Yeah, she takes a lot of damage from battleships, for sure.
But even then, if you fight other DEs, what happens is that your damage output is so insanely high that you might even sink the destroyer before you take much major damage from the battleships.
Yeah, it really just depends on how good you are at shooting other destroyers. But yeah, I mean the reload is very forgiving.
Yeah, but did they improve the handling and agility any?
No, not that I felt anything like that.
They're fast, but they're not particularly agile. Is kind of the way that I felt they were.
Yeah, exactly the same. Although I would say that they're probably agile. It's just that the ship is so big that it doesn't seem as agile as, other destroyers because, your frame of reference on how agile a ship is based on the size of the ship. So it might not seem that she's as agile as other ships. It's kind of like when an Iowa goes 32 knots, it doesn't seem super fast unless you have like another ship next to her.
That's a pretty good comparison as well. So I guess that moves us on to everybody's favorite testing ship, Stalingrad. Now we have this newest version, and for me, the Stalingrad has been kind of a trial by fire of testing. I really enjoyed the AP only version. This version brought back some of that for me, but kept the HE. I think it's a fun ship now, but it's not like I don't feel like you have to be particularly skilled to play it.
Isn't that a good thing?
I don't know if it is or not. Like I enjoyed like one of the cool things that I really liked about the Stalingrad was that it was a ship that not everybody could play, and that not everybody was going to get, and that it was kind of unique. It feels very watered down from that to me, but I mean, it's like you're right. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? I have a hard time saying that one way or the other.
Do we know how Wargaming is going to handle ships like that in terms of balancing? Like, are they willing to nerf them if they find that the ship is too overpowered? Or is it the same as normal premiums?
I think it's the same as normal premiums, and we talked to Iro Gray a little bit about it, and he said it's a very difficult ship for them to balance because of the way that it's coming into the game and the people that are going to be playing it and getting it because it's a reward for clan battles.
Well, in that case, I can understand why they would be hesitant to make it too strong, because if they can't really nerf it again, that would cause a lot of problems.
But can they? Because this ship isn't technically sold. It's a reward ship that they're giving out for steel.
I don't know. I guess we'll
There's
find
no
out.
monetary value there, so I mean, I don't see why they couldn't make adjustments to the ship. I mean, technically they have. Well, I mean, what iteration of test version have we been on the ship? Same thing with Graf Zeppelin.
I mean, we've got to be to like 8 by now at least. Did you play this at all? The Stalingrad version, Vanessa?
I did. I mean, I put some games into, various, every time they're like, all right, here's a new version to test. I've gone in there and played a couple of games. I mean, I don't want to say it feels like a Russian battleship, but I mean, you definitely have the hit points. You can take damage unless you're broadside and Yamato is shooting at you, in which case you're really going to take some damage. But the guns are super punchy and they definitely do damage. And if you want to sit there and HE spam, you could accurately do that too. And you've got radar, you've got speed, you've got HP and can take the damage. So, I mean, those guns are really laser. I mean, they're rail guns. It's ridiculous how accurate they feel.
Yeah, I mean, the guns feel good. Like there's no question about that. It just doesn't like the AP only version. You had to make tough choices, and that made it a difficult a challenging ship to play and a fun ship to play, in my opinion, because you couldn't say, "Oh, I don't have any shots, so I'm just going to spam HE." You don't have now. You don't have to think about, oh, where's my shots placement going to be when it's in less than ideal angle. So that aspect of the ship just kind of lessens it for me.
Come on, though. It can't be like a Russian battleship. Aren't Russian battleships going to have Iron Curtain from Red Alert 2, where it makes the ship immune to damage for a while?
I think that's what they're going to have. Yeah, that's going to be their special ability for sure.
Probably with Tesla coils and everything else.
Alrighty. Well, we also have an entire new line of ships, the British destroyers. Now, Arun, I was really enjoyed your recent video, the Daring and the Wows video, because you were doing some pretty in-depth testing of like the DPM and what they can do. Could you give us a general sense of how the British destroyers work and Daring in particular, and kind of what are their strengths and weaknesses on a general level?
So, in general, this is going to apply to the Jutland and the Daring because those are the ones that have 114 millimeter guns. And the problem with those is that you need IFHE to be able to penetrate the armor of the other destroyers with your HE. And you must get this commander skill because if you don't, what the other DD can do is they can just point their nose at you and you can't do damage to them. Like, you can try shooting her superstructure, but good luck doing that in a destroyer fight. So that's a must-take ability. And even with IFHE, the problem is that while you can do damage to DDs and you're very deadly, like you're like a Haruguma in terms of damage output. So basically like throwing a Des Moines in the face of DD. Problem is you can't actually deal damage to battleships and most cruisers other than the superstructure. Sure, you start a ton of fires, of a huge amount of fires. I think you start more fires than maybe not all the tier 10 cruisers, but almost all of them. However, you don't do alpha damage to battleships most of the time, and you don't do much to cruisers either. So the guns feel very good in a DD fight and kind of useless elsewhere other than starting fires. In terms of torpedoes, they're kind of mediocre. The single launch torpedoes are super useful though, because when you go around the corner and start fighting, you can fire some of your torpedoes but keep a few in reserve. You can't do this in other DDs because, you know, you want to put out all of them. Like, you're not going to keep one or two torpedoes in reserve just in case, you know, you miss and to be able to do a follow-up because, you know, you only have one or two launchers, so you'll just fire all of them. But on the British DDs, you can do this, and that seems to be a very useful thing. I would say that the most useful part of them, though, is their concealment, because as far as I noticed, all of them had very low concealment compared to the other ships that they will play against. And this means that you'll be contesting caps a lot and spotting other DDs, I guess. So in terms of the testing, though, those are a bit overblown because you'll never get that close to other ships. Like, I did a test against the Minotaur where AP on the Daring actually sank the Minotaur before the Minotaur sank the Daring. But that's not something you'll ever find in a real battle, I think.
Yeah, not to mention that, you know, they're not the quickest destroyers out there. So you could definitely get yourself in trouble if someone wants to try and run you down. And there was a couple matches where I had Dmitry and several, you know, Russian cruisers like running me down in the various British destroyers that I was testing. It didn't matter the tier. There were, you know, fast ships. If they know your location, it's really hard to get away from them. Even if you can, you know, go silent, go dark, and try to break contact, just, you know, you don't have a really difference in speed to, you know, maybe break away, maybe drop some torpedoes. Because if you try and turn, you're going to lose more speed, you're going to lose ground, and it can make it really difficult in open water. So when you're playing these ships, you have to think really tactically about, you know, who you could be facing on the other side of the cap or who you're going to meet on the other side, you know, of this, you know, watery battlefield. And you have to be careful. If you get too close, you might not be able to get away. So you have to really think about what you're doing with these ships.
Dmitry Donskoy is actually faster because the British destroyers don't actually get speed boost, and the Donskoy is 1 knot faster. So if the Donskoy doesn't want you to be able to break contact, sorry, nothing you can really do about it, especially if you add in radar to that.
Exactly.
So I guess then the logical follow-on question is that we just had we do clan battles at tier 10, and we looking at a possibility of another ranked battle at tier 10. What do these ships do for your team in kind of a more competitive sense? You mentioned that they were relatively stealthy. Are they stealthy enough that you would want them for that purpose in competitive modes?
I think the daring could work out that way, because she can fight off she can basically fight off any of the destroyers. The problem is that if you're talking clan battles, then sure. If you're talking like tournaments, then no, because she doesn't have enough anti-air and she isn't fast and maneuverable enough to make it worth it. I think in clan battles, I think it comes down to speed. And the other thing is that if you bring a Shimakaze instead, which I guess some do, you have a bigger punch with torpedoes. So I don't know. It feels kind of questionable.
There does tend to be at certain times in ranked, at least, there being a fair amount of DDs in the meta. If that were to be the case in the next ranked season, would this be would this be worth it to take it as a pure anti-destroyer destroyer?
Honestly, if we're gonna get Haraguma in the way that we are right now, I don't think so, because I think you might still lose a fight against Haraguma in a 1 versus 1, because you don't have as much HP as the Haraguma does, and your damage output is basically the same or very similar. So I don't know. Oh, and the Haraguma is actually faster too.
Yeah, but it also devolves down to the fact that there's still a ton of radar in these, ranked matches. Even with the duration nerf, you still have an ample amount of radar-based cruisers that I always encountered in the meta, and they always get into position to cover your caps. So you really have to wait either between the radars, which is difficult to do, or just to hope to not get caught out and, waste a smoke, get radar, disengage. I don't know. It seems pretty difficult. You might be able to try to be sneaky in there, but the moment you go into a cap, someone's going to radar you. So you might be able to flank, not like crazy flank, but maybe try to get single launch torpedoes on a flanked position at some of those radar cruisers that are covering the cap. But then again, the torpedo range is short. It's not. I don't think it's really conducive enough to try and do that. You're still getting really close, and you don't have the speed to disengage, and people are going to know that, and they're just going to run you down. So I think it would be very challenging.
I think British DDs might be a great platform to test out the anti-radar consumable. Like, we haven't heard anything about it. I'm sorry, we haven't heard anything about it right now, right? But if we're going to have something like that, I think British DDs aren't really powerful enough right now to go out there and be overpowered. So something added to them might not actually break them.
Yeah, I mean, that's something to think about. I don't know. I'd kind of rather see something different to address radar than necessarily another consumable. But I could see the play and counterplay aspect of it there. One of the things that I kind of wanted to bring up, and it's not just with British destroyers, but it's just the British Navy in this game. And I feel Wargaming has really shoehorned different styles into their ships that I wish maybe they hadn't. I don't like that British battleships, more or less are HE flaming monsters. I don't like that British cruisers only fire AP. And now you have British destroyers that don't have speed boost. And this is just kind of a recurring theme with the Royal Navy, and I don't really care for it. I really wish Wargaming would not have done this with Her Majesty's fleet.
Yeah, they are definitely not the ships that I kind of envisioned when before this came out, and we were just talking about it in general. I guess, do you see that these ships fit into World of Warships in general, or are they just kind of something that they're cool, but nobody's really going to play?
Well, I mean, I can see what Wargaming is wanting to do and what their hopes is. Here are different lines of ships that can complement and give you a different gameplay style than, say these other ships and other lines. I would say, envision British destroyers as an actual escort destroyer, where you stick close enough to your cruisers and your battleships, and you just kind of form this, symbiotic relationship where you are out there, you got your hydro on, you're screening for torpedoes, you're screening against other destroyers, you are anti-destroying those other destroyers, whilst your cruisers are not too far behind you and your battleships feel safe because you're screening the torpedoes and other destroyers. I see what they're wanting to do with these ships, but why are none of the other destroyer lines like this? Why are, I just feel like, they go over the top with, this is the play style that you have to play with British ships.
I think that the British DDs would have, especially the higher tier ones, would have fit more into the game if the Japanese, Akizuki, Kitakaze, and Harugumas, HE penetration wasn't buffed. Because right now, those are actually lower caliber guns, but for some reason they have more penetration. And it's, more in terms of being able to penetrate more important ships that you'll actually fight at those tiers. And it seems to me like the British DDs don't fit into the game in that sense. And other than that, they're kind of okay at some things, good at others. But overall, I would say that they're eh.
I mean, I think that there'll be maybe something will happen. I mean, I do think that you made a good point about the anti-radar consumable being something that these ships could champion to a large degree. So, without unnecessarily breaking or needing to retwig them. So we'll see how that comes in when they decide to get added to the game. So. But we actually do have some more listener question and answer sessions that I'd like to get into, because we've run out of time the last couple of weeks to talk about them. So Patreon backer Blastoman asks, with Alaska and Jean Bart announced as tier 9s, do you think that they will both be released as free XP ships, coal steel ships, or for dollars in the premium store? To date, there have been 3 premium tier 9s released as free XP: Missouri, Musashi, and Kronstadt, and 1 tier 9 released as steel, black. And I'm asking because he's asking because he doesn't know what to focus on to grind for his currencies.
I don't understand the question. Isn't that like if you like the only way to grind for a steel is basically super containers, and other than basically, aren't you going to get free XP anyway, even when you're getting all the steel that you're trying to get? So I mean, aren't you getting both at the same time anyway?
Well, I mean, we have the new resources containers, so that might be he might be asking, should I focus on the resources containers to get coal?
I mean, yes.
Well,
but it's not related. Go on.
I mean, this is just a speculation, because we don't know, and even if Wargaming did tell us, we probably couldn't talk about it. But I would say, have a balanced spreadsheet of resources. If you feel it's going to be free XP, definitely save your free XP. If you feel it's going to be coal, save your coal. And do so in a balanced manner until you find out what Wargaming is going to do with said ship. And then, if that is what you want, then work towards that. Until then, if you say you want the Alaska, and it's like, that is my absolute goal. I just want the Alaska. I don't know what it's going to be. Then have a balanced approach. Get coal. If you're doing clan battles, clan battles, try and participate. Get as much steel as you can. If it is going to be steel, next ranked season, absolutely go for it. Try and get as much steel as you can when you can, and save up. If it's free XP, just save all your free XP possible, and just have a good balance sheet of free XP, coal, and get steel whenever you can. And that way, when that ship comes out that, oh gosh, I really want, the Alaska, or I really want the USS Black, or whatever ship comes down the line that they decide to throw out in this manner, then, you're just ready for it. You have all your resources saved and you can purchase it. And then when you do purchase your ship, then, maybe I should restock that resource that I just used to spend for the next ship that comes along. That way I'm ready for it.
All that said, my expectation is that Alaska and Jean Bart will be free XP premiums, and that they will cost 750,000 free XP. So something to keep in mind. So Reddit user Aerospace asks, have you ever received a reason why a consumable-based matchmaker cannot be implemented for ranked? And would we, as players, be willing to wait for an extra minute in queue to have a better balanced match in ranked seasons?
I would be willing to wait. I don't know if we've been given a proper explanation why, but I would wager that it's because messing with the matchmaker is really difficult, because it can have some really bad unintended consequences. But basically, if you don't get the matchmaker right, it might not be that you have to wait an extra minute. It might be that you have to wait like 3 extra minutes instead. And the problem with the matchmaker is that this is something we as players don't really notice, because we have our own tolerance on how long we're willing to wait in queue. But we don't know what the tolerance is for other players. Like, it might very well be that increasing the matchmaking time by 2 minutes might make so many players not play that it's not worth it for wargaming. So I don't really know if this is something that they're willing to work on right now, but I would like it. I would absolutely love it if radars were balanced on both teams.
So I do know that they have said that they intend to have nation-based matchmaking, so that you have the same number of nations on each side. And so, like, if you have 2 U.S. and cruisers on one side, you'll have 2 U.S. and cruisers on the other side. But they have said that, like Aaron said, that matchmaking based on consumables is not something that they're looking at. Vanessa, have you heard anything else on that topic?
Well, I'm really trying to think, there's things that we know and that we can talk about, and there's things that we know that we can't talk about. And while I'm trying to think of it, not to wargaming, they want you to be in the match. And I think that they really, fear that, if you wait a long time, that can make someone disinterested in the game. And so the idea is to get people into matches quickly. And like Arun was saying, if you mess with the matchmaking, that can have unintended consequences and throw extra, a really significant amount of wait time on the game. And the idea is you want people to play your game, and you want them, when they hit battle, they should be getting into a match pretty quickly. And I know on the North American server, there are times where you can click that battle button, especially a lot of times when I play, and you're going to be waiting in queue because there's not enough players out there to play with. And then if you throw these instances in where you've got to try and, match the radars, you could be waiting a significant amount of time. And for each individual, their tolerance could be different. And I think wargaming has to look at, they have to look at statistics, and they have to look at, their feedback from players as a whole. And I think, maybe on this one, they feel that when someone hits the battle button, they need to be in a match, as soon as possible, with as good of a breakdown of team balance as possible, because they want people in game having fun, not sitting there staring at a counter screen with a time, ticking away.
So I wanted to add that what Kjellorn earlier mentioned about the nations, that's kind of in the game and has been for years, I think. It's just that it's like a very low priority thing. There's like a bunch of priorities. Like, the first priorities are that you get enough players, then that they're the right tiers, that they're the right classes. And some of those priorities are like mandatory. For example, if you're a carrier, then there must be an enemy carrier on the other side. But some of them are kind of like, it's great if we can get it, but if we can't, then that's okay. And one of those is the nations thing. And I think such a low priority thing could also be used for radar stuff. So if there are enough players with radars around to balance it, I think that would be a great idea, because honestly, having a balanced amount of radars seems more important to me than having balanced nations, really. Especially because the nations thing can be used to mess a little bit with the matchmaking. Because let's imagine you have a match that's only tier 7. So if I pick a British cruiser like the Fiji, what if both teams are going to have the same numbers of nations? This means that the enemy team has a higher chance of getting a Belfast than my team, because I picked the Fiji, so the opposing team is going to get the tier 7 British cruiser, and there's only 2 of them. So I think radar would, or based on consumables, would actually be a better choice than nations. And I do wish that we would get this one time in the future. But I wanted to elaborate on the unintended consequences. I don't mean that everyone's going to get 3 minutes extra. I think it's going to be rather that some players that pick like a radar ship might have to wait extra at a specific tier. And this is something that's difficult to test for.
Yeah, I could definitely see, like tier 7 being an issue with that, particularly because, you have a couple USN cruisers that have radar, and you have one British cruiser that has radar. And yeah, that could definitely wreak havoc with, and let's be honest, when we're talking about consumables, we're talking about radar. Because, I mean, there's what other consumable really, like, drives as much salt as radar?
We must get the balanced amount of damage control parties on both teams.
Spotter planes. Totally spotter planes.
Yeah, we definitely got to balance those spotter plane Des Moines. The Euro would be pleased. So forum user Max Vladimus asks, are there plans to introduce more ships for the Pan America tech tree?
Well, I mean, yeah, I hope so as well. We could speculate all day. But there are so many, good examples, especially, pre-World War I, examples for Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. I mean, those countries alone, you could have several different premiums, or you could maybe even do a line of ships in there. And I know there's some great forums post elaborating on, lines or semi-lines of ships for these nations. And there's definitely potential there. I know, given this game goes on a couple more years, yeah, there's going to be all manner of examples that Wargaming is going to want to pull from. Because, when you get, the major nations out of the way, just look at World of Tanks. World of Tanks is a great example of, okay, we've kind of exhausted, the major countries out there and their tanks. And even then, they still come up, with concepts and test tanks and various things that they can elaborate on and bring out as, hey, here's, a concept, here's another tank that we're going to bring in the game. Or, here's the Swedish tank line, or here's the Czech tank line. And give World of Warships enough time, and I feel we're going to be in the exact same position where, they'll go and look, hey, here are some great pre-Dreadnought or Dreadnought era Brazil ships, and let's put them in the Pan American tree, for example.
Yeah, like the Minas Gerais, or however you pronounce it.
I believe the Riva de Iva, I believe, is the Argentinian battleship, and Minas was the Brazilian one. I think those would be a very cool paired set of low tier premiums, tier 3, tier 4, something like that.
And it's not it's not just Pan American. I mean, there's many
Austria-Hungary,
yeah,
Ottoman Empire. I mean, there's a
lot. Finland and Sweden. I mean, there's so many. Greek. the Netherlands. I mean, come on. I know we're gonna see. We've got the T-61, and that was a Dutch destroyer, and there's gonna be so many different minor nations or just other nations that they will eventually be able to do, just given time.
So speaking of low tiers, Reddit user Callus Jack asks, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the viability of a lower tier ranked season. While tiers 4 and 5 are certainly some power monster and balanced ships, I personally think it would be a nice change of pace from the tier 6 plus of the last year or so.
I don't know about tier 4, because we all know what would happen if tier 4 was a ranked season and Imperator Nikolai. Oh my god. Tier 5, that could be interesting.
I would have, the problem I have with tier 5, Vanessa, is Gremyashki. And the people that have Gremyashki are going to wreck the people that don't.
Minakaze?
Minakaze isn't, isn't as big a deal anymore, but Kamikaze.
Yeah. Well, when I say Minakaze, I mean, Kamikaze and Fujin. Yeah, I mean, that would be tough. I mean, I'm trying to think of the battleships in and around that tier, and, they're slow. Most of them are pretty slow.
Except for Congo.
Yeah, and you'd have a lot of Congo. You have people probably pulling out their ARP Congos and
Giulio.
Yes, Giulio Cesare.
I think I think that 5 would be a really interesting tier, but I also think that it could be really problematic just because of the premiums. The tech tree ships are fine. Like there'd be no problem with the tech tree ships. The problem is going to be the torpedo spam from the Kamikazes and the just absolute powerhouse of the Gremyashki. And to some degree, the Cesare, I think, might be a problem too. But the rest, I think that the rest would be really fun tier.
I feel kind of the same way about tier 4. Like Ivaki Alpha, that ship is a bit too strong for the competition.
Arkansas Beta?
Yeah, exactly. Arkansas Beta too. Although if you run into a carrier, you're kind of... But then again, it's ranked, so you're probably not going to run into one.
Yeah, but I mean, Imperator Nikolai, it's just...
But regardless, I don't expect to see a low tier ranked season. At least not anytime soon.
Yeah, if anything, let's go tier 3, where a cruiser has more HP than a battleship.
St. Louis spam?
Yes.
If they did special restrictions, like... Because, I mean, tier 4 and tier 5, it takes nothing at all to get to those, tech tree ships. If they made it tech tree only, that could be really interesting. And if they ever did something like tech tree only, those could be, some brackets that you could do it in, because I mean it doesn't take anything at all for a new player to get to tier 4 and tier 5.
Well, some interesting speculation, but that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you again so much for the questions. I think that about does it for the questions that we had, and we will probably try and ask for some more in the near future. Vanessa, Arun, did you guys have any announcements this week?
Not an announcement, but I would like to complain a little bit. So I've been playing Dota a bit recently, and I noticed something interesting. When I double click on Dota in Steam, it takes me about 8 to 9 seconds until I am in queue in Dota. I timed the same in World of Warships. I double clicked on the game icon. I waited until the game opened up. I clicked to log in. I waited until all that stuff goes away. It took me 1 minute and 9 seconds. I would really love to see that improved. Not necessarily the startup time, but the UI itself in terms of how responsive it is.
I have a lot of problems with the in-game UI. Like, it is very cumbersome. There's a lot of click, wait type of thing. That it does not feel very responsive. So yeah, that's been one of my primary complaints about the game for quite a while. Vanessa, any announcements or complaints or anything?
No,
any airplanes you want to steal?
I'm sorry. Oh, let's not talk about that. Work has been crazy the past 4 weeks in SeaTac. It just, and I don't really want to, yeah. No, I'm glad to actually be able to be on the show. Like, the past 4 or 5 weeks have been crazy, and summer can be pretty trying up here, especially what I do for work. And it's always not necessarily easy to, work around the schedule with some of the guests that we want to have on the show. Sometimes it doesn't always work out when we can record and participate as well. So I do apologize. I wish my schedule was more conducive to always be here for all of you folks. But I do really appreciate everyone's kind words in game, and anyone who listens to the show. Just thank you so much for your support, because it really does mean a lot to us. We do this show for you and for the community, and just thank you.
No argument here. And thank you again for the people that have recently added us on Patreon. That helps us out every day and helps us produce the podcast. So, and that's it for this week, folks. As always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. If you're looking for some podcast swag, we've started up a store on Spreadshirt.com that makes podcast branded t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, mouse pads, and other cool things. The URL for that is shop.spreadshirt.com/Warships Podcast. And like I just mentioned, we of course want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself. Backers do get access to special giveaways, one of which will be coming up very soon. Take care, everyone, and we will see you next week.